All right, we're back. We're doing another one. Overrated versus underrated synths budget edition. What's up and welcome back to another video. My name is Devin Belanger, and thanks to the great response on my last overrated versus underrated synth videos, I've decided to do the same thing, but this time taking your suggestions, yes, I do read the comments, and focusing exclusively on budget synthesizers. So if you're new around here, how this works is we're just gonna go through reverb, and I've set a couple parameters here. So first and foremost, the max price is going to be $697.03. As of making this today, that is how much 500 US dollars is when converted to Canadian dollars. Yes, I know, I was surprised too. So if you're feeling sorry for this Canadian over here, please like and subscribe so I can keep this channel going. And I'm also going to limit the decade from the 2020s to the 2000s because I don't really specialize in vintage synthesizers. I really love synths from the last 30 years. A couple final things before we get started. Firstly, why should you listen to me? Well, I mentioned this in the last video, but I've been producing music professionally under the name Miles Away for many years now. I've written, produced, and engineered songs that have gotten millions of streams, and I primarily use synthesizers, a mixture of hardware, as you can see here, and software synthesizers in my music. Importantly, up until about 2017, I was exclusively making music inside my computer with VSTs. So it's worth noting that if you just want to make music, you just want to make electronic music, you can absolutely make electronic music with just nothing but a laptop and a pair of headphones. Secondly, these overrated and underrated picks are just my opinion, my subjective opinion. You are free to disagree with me civilly in the comments. I read every single comment, and I'd love to hear if you think I got something totally wrong. It's always really fun to see how different musicians will interpret or interface with different pieces of gear. With that out of the way, let's get started with the first piece of gear. And I'm gonna go right here on the front page and go for the Behringer Model D. Despite being one of the most sold synthesizers of the last 10 years, I'm still gonna go with underrated for the Behringer Model D. Now let me tell you, the Behringer Model D, it's one of those things that is so controversial and so talked about in the synth community that it's sort of veered from being overrated because everyone was talking about it when it first came out to now underrated because you don't really hear people talk about it anymore. And look at this price, ladies and gentlemen, 265 Canadian dollars. People to this day, including me, put the Moog Model D on a pedestal because it's not just another monosynth. Much like the Sequential Prophet 5, which I still think is the archetype for and one of, if not the greatest polysynths ever, the Model D is the archetype for and one of, if not the greatest monosynths ever. And the Behringer clone absolutely nails all of the nuances. Now, I'm sure there's going to be those of you who point out little small 5–10% differences, which is totally understandable and expected, but where it matters, the Model D nails it. The overdriven mixer causing this beautiful saturated sound that just cuts through a busy mix, they nailed it. The third oscillator being able to be used as an LFO, the classic Moog Model D sound of 3 detuned oscillators, each with their own pitch control. This is one of the synths I regret letting go, and one of these days I think it's owed to the Model D for me to make a video. Ooh, this is a good one here. Next up, the Korg MS-20 Mini. Now, absolutely underrated. The MS-20 is one of the greatest monosynths ever and one of my personal favorite monosynths that, although it is extremely famous, I still feel like it's a little bit underrated. And what makes it unique is the dual low-pass, high-pass filter configuration and the Salin key filter. I always get the pronunciation wrong for that just snarls like nothing else. Now, one of my favorite artists, John Hopkins, is a big proponent of the MS-20, and if you go and check out his music, such as Open Eye Signal, almost all of those distorted bass sounds are done with the MS-20, which is right up my alley. These are the kind of synths where you can still make sounds that people might not have heard, even though these synths have been around for years and years and years, and that's a testament to just how unique and driven and powerful the filter is. Just like the Behringer Model D, the Korg MS-20 Mini is such a full-featured and well-thought-through remake that there's really only one thing negative I can say about it, and that is the mini keys. Yeah, I know, I hate mini keys too, but if you can get past the mini keys, then the Korg MS-20 Mini is honestly one of the more unique and underrated synthesizers that you could grab as your first monosynth. Also, don't let this price fool you. I think that this is probably really overpriced because I've seen these locally for like 400 Canadian dollars, and let's just see what the price would be. Okay, so they have gone up in price a little bit. That's actually worth noting. You know, I'm gonna still leave it at underrated, but maybe it's not quite as much of an easy bargain as back when I was seeing these on Craigslist locally. I'm still gonna settle on underrated, but that's always worth noting. You know, some synths will change in value and price, and obviously keep that in mind if you're looking to purchase. Ooh, next one is gonna be maybe a controversial one here. The Arturia Microfreak. Overrated. Now, I am a huge fan of Arturia. I think that their Minifreak synthesizer, which I've reviewed, you can check that out up here, is one of the best budget synthesizers available. And it doesn't quite fit under our $500 price tag, but if it did, I'd say absolutely great synthesizer. You should definitely grab one. It's my top pick for budget synthesizers for a reason. However, its younger brother, the Arturia Microfreak, I actually don't feel the same about. Now, before you get your pitchforks out, hear me out. I think that the Microfreak does offer a ton of synthesizer value for the money. Namely, the vocoder update is super cool. And if you just want a vocoder, then sure, it's not overrated. This is pretty cool that you can get a hardware vocoder for 350 Canadian dollars. But as a synthesizer, unfortunately, the Arturia Microfreak, I think, isn't what I would say is necessarily either very characterful and musically pleasing or very versatile, because it is paraphonic. What that means is that it has 4 voices, can play 4 notes at once, but they all share the same analog filter. Now, I totally understand that it would have been cost prohibitive to have made a separate analog filter per voice. If you want that, you got to spend more money and get the 6-voice Minifreak. But the idea of a bunch of very weird, harsh digital algorithms that are basically all going into one filter, it's not something that I think is a very useful sound if you're actually looking to finish songs and make music. If you really want to play around and kind of learn synthesis, again, I'm not a huge fan of the Arturia Microfreak, because you're gonna learn maybe some bad habits that aren't necessarily the most applicable to actually carrying over to other synthesizers. For example, the keyboard, it's not traditional. It's this very weird membrane keyboard that you either love it or hate it. The paraphonic nature of the synthesizer, you're gonna be really kind of, you know, missing out on a lot of what makes subtractive synthesizers, which is having a filter per voice. And then again, the sound engines, which I don't inherently dislike, are really sort of these kind of best of screenshots where you're getting to cycle through a whole bunch of them and each one has a parameter for each, rather than your typical sort of subtractive synthesizer. I think the Microfreak is a really fun synth if you just want to play around, but I'm putting it in the overrated bracket because, again, like I mentioned at the start of the video, I'm rating things based on how useful I think they are if you actually want to finish songs, want to put out music, want something that, you know, is going to be different and get you outside of your computer. We are back. My camera just died there for a second. Okay, let's move on. There's that Behringer MS-20 clone I was talking about. That is shockingly cheap. Honestly, at $190, maybe I would say that's actually worth it. But I do think if you're really into MS-20s, the Korg one sounds more accurate. All right, we gotta go for the OG Minilogue. Now, the OG Minilogue, and I'll make sure I talk about the Minilogue XD as well. The OG Minilogue, I have to say, is overrated. I had a twinge in my voice there because I really love the OG Minilogue. It was one of the first synthesizers, hardware synthesizers that I played. But here's my gripe with the OG Minilogue. The OG Minilogue, it focuses so much on what was at the time a really novel concept, which is a budget all analog polyphonic synthesizer. Like, seriously, hats off to Korg for making this at the time, and really, I think, breaking a lot of ground that led to a ton more demand and interest in the renaissance of analog polyphonic synthesizers. The Minilogue for its time was amazing, but when comparing the sound to other more recent polyphonic analog synthesizers, including even budget polyphonic analog synthesizers, it just does not hold up, unfortunately, sound-wise. The OG Minilogue has a really shrill filter that is not the nicest sound, and it has a very, very, let's say, characterful delay, which is not exactly my favorite thing in the world either, and it's mono out, so you're sacrificing a lot just to have it say analog on the front. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge proponent of analog synthesizers, and I love analog synths. It's one of the reasons why I encourage people to get into hardware, but the Minilogue just doesn't quite have that. I think a lot of corners had to be cut, whereas the Minilogue XD, let's see if that falls under our budget here. It might be just over. Okay, look at this. We're like over by $5. So I'm gonna include this 700 Canadian dollars. That's like 503 US dollars. The Minilogue XD Module, which I actually have one back here, I'm gonna grab it in a second, is an underrated gem. Here we go. It's a little dusty from not being used much recently, but this guy, I picked one up a while ago to make patches, which I'm still working through the patches, but I was blown away by how great this synth sounds. And seriously, like sound quality, it punches against these extremely expensive synths behind me. I highly recommend and still think the Minilogue XD, especially the module version, because of how much cheaper they are, is very, very underrated. The filter that they changed to is similar to the Prologue filter, similar to the MS-20 filter. It's miles better. The digital effects are way better here. You've got your multi-engine, which can be anything from white noise to, you know, FM to user oscillators. This thing is basically like a mini 4-voice Prologue, and I still think to this day, if you're not going for the Arturia Microfreak because you don't need necessarily, you know, the full 6 voices, the Minilogue XD is the best sounding budget polysynth you can buy. All right, let's move on here. Ooh, this is a good one. This one might be another controversial one. The Moog Subharmonicon. Now, the Moog Subharmonicon, I'm gonna say, is another overrated Moog synth. And I'm sorry if I've offended any Moog purists here, but there's a trend that I don't love that I'm seeing in some synthesizer manufacturers, including Moog right now, which is to create these like little mini desktop unit boxes that are all sort of quirky but limited in their own way. I could see there's a place for something like the Subharmonicon if you're just really interested in subdividing your oscillators and sub-oscillators and kind of getting like unpredictable melodic content. But beyond that, I just don't really see, as someone who is, again, making this list from the perspective of, I want to help you make music, I want to help you create songs and you know, give you something that is going to be both useful but maybe not as accessible as like a plugin or, you know, your everyday average, you know, VST synthesizer. And while I definitely understand that the Subharmonicon does things that you probably wouldn't normally get, however, it's just a lot of work for what is essentially going to be controversial. I know, a fairly limited polyphonic sequencer synthesizer. Again, going back to our Minilogue XD, I think you'd be much better suited grabbing something like that for almost the same price. Again, pretty much exactly the same price if you get the module. And for that reason, I do have to say the Subharmonicon is gonna fall into my overrated camp, along with the Mother 32 and a lot of the other Moog desktop machines besides the DFAM. I've got a soft spot for the DFAM. I just love industrial, and the DFAM does something very unique that you really can't get to unless you go grab something like a Percons, which is a lot more expensive. What's next? I feel like I've been super negative on this video, so I gotta get a positive one. Let's see. This one is too new to talk about whether it's overrated or underrated. Time will tell, but it seems like it's a pretty great deal if you want an 8-voice polyphonic synthesizer. So, you know, shout out Behringer Pro 800, but again, too new to say overrated or underrated. Oh, this is a cool one to talk about briefly. The Arturia Minibrute 2. Yeah, as you can see, really, really great deal. The Arturia Minibrute 2 is definitely underrated. I will preface this by saying that I'm not the biggest fan of the Brute series of Arturia synthesizers in terms of their sound. They don't have the biggest sweet spot, but you can definitely coax some great sounds out of them. I find they excel more within the sort of really metallic and harsh realm, which I know I sound like I'm contradicting myself here because I love the otherworldly aggression of something like an MS-20, but the Arturia Minibrute 1 and Minibrute 2, it's definitely a case of if you like the sound, if you like the metalizer, then this is a great synthesizer. Like the fact that for $525, you're getting a full-sized keyboard with a full modular patch matrix, a really powerful sequencer. I had a Minibrute 2.1 that I sold and it was not for me, but I have to give credit where it's due that for $525, a full analog, you know, mono synth with the patch matrix, the Arturia classic kind of like build quality. This is a really good synth if you like that tone, and it like could be another option if you're thinking between like an MS-20 or a Minibrute 2, about the same price. I think they're both great synths, just different flavors of aggression. Oh, here's another good one here. The Roland Gaia. Now, this one might be a little bit of a surprise to you because I talked about the importance for this list of getting something that you couldn't really get necessarily in the box, at least very easily. And the Roland Gaia is firstly underrated, massively underrated. And secondly, even though it's digital, I'm gonna have it on this list and say it's underrated because for this price, you're getting a almost knob per function polyphonic synthesizer with a ton of really cool features, a solid build quality. Like Roland stuff is, you know, we can joke about its aesthetics all we want, but it's actually really well built for the most part. And yeah, most importantly, you're getting, if you've ever sort of wanted just like a VST with a really good controller, the Gaia is exactly that. And because the Gaia has sort of been forgotten, it's been featured on bad gear, it's maybe not the most advanced sound engine, it's really not that expensive anymore. Like I bet you, let's see, if we go to the product overview here, let's see here. Yeah, 350 Canadian dollars, right? So that's something that is really a massive bargain at this point because the Gaia is a fully featured polyphonic synthesizer. Again, the sound engine, it's not going to be anything to write home for. If you are used to using synths like Diva or synths like the G-Force emulations, they are going to sound better than the Gaia. But there's a bit of a, you know, at least for me personally, a nostalgia for those like late 90s, early 2000s digital JD8000 style sounds like from Trance, the classic like In Search of Sunrise, like Super Saw Plux, all those kinds of things. If you like those kinds of like early 2000s, late 90s sounds and you want a knob per function polyphonic synthesizer, the Gaia, underrated. Definitely consider picking one of these up if you see one locally for next to nothing. Oh, here's a great one to finish on. The Behringer 2600. So I recently did a video on the ARP 2600M, so the Korg recreation at the 70% scale, and I had purchased that before the Behringer 2600 came out, but I actually liked the sound of the 2600 from Behringer just as much, and this is a synth that was probably 1/4 to 1/5 of the cost of the ARP 2600M. So I think that we're talking about first synths, first mono synths. If you're looking to have a synthesizer that both has a lot of history and heritage, is a fantastic synth to learn on for educational purposes, and sounds fantastic and gives you that analog flavor you're not going to get in a VST necessarily, the 2600 from Behringer is a phenomenal synthesizer. It's got all of the features that you would want from the original ARP 2600, including an additional LFO, which is very cool. That would have been very handy on my 2600M because that was originally on the keyboard module attachment for the real 2600s. And it has phenomenal, like, just overall attention to detail, and you can do all of the same classic sounds like the R2D2 voltage processor with slew rate limiter, all sorts of really great audio rate modulation between the different oscillators and oscillator to filter. The Behringer 2600 is the type of synth that for the money, you're getting a synth that you'll probably never outgrow. I've been programming synthesizers for many, many years, and I still found myself being constantly surprised by how powerful a 2600 is. And still, when I'll watch someone who's a true pro on a 2600, like Anthony Marianelli, I still pick up new things. So the only thing I'd mention is that the 2600, these black ones, they have a digital reverb. Definitely try to get one of the blue or gray models, as those ones have, as far as I understand, a real spring reverb. I'm a big fan of those effects you're not going to be able to get from a plugin. So anyways, that's where I'll wrap things up for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. And if you do want to buy one of these synthesizers, and I have an affiliate link for the store that you enjoy, Perfect Circuit, Sweetwater, etc., then please click the affiliate link. It costs nothing extra for you, but it really does let me know that my work is appreciated and to keep making videos like this for all you guys. Anyways, thanks so much. I will see you in the next video.